I sat outside Nordstrom clutching the velvet gift bag, the July sun beating down as strangers hurried past. My knees ached, my phone battery blinked red, and still, no car, no daughter. Just silence where love should have been. Hours later, I carried that same bag into a penthouse suite high in the Smoky Mountains. No one waiting, no one asking. For the first time in years, the room was mine, and so was the peace. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Ellie Barnes pressed her palm against the cool glass doors of Nordstrom and squinted into the lot. The Tennessee sun hung low and lazy, but its heat still licked at the concrete like a stove left on too long. She adjusted the strap of her purse, heavier than usual after buying Sam the rose gold watch she'd been admiring for months. One with the little diamond markers, the kind Ellie would never buy for herself. Her phone buzzed weakly in her hand, the battery icon blinking red. Outside Nordstrom entrance, she had texted 20 minutes ago. She'd typed it twice, the second time just in case Sam missed it in the flood of messages she always complained about. 45 minutes now. She shifted her weight, knees barking in protest, and sat on the edge of a low planter. It smelled faintly of mulch and too sweet flower bed fertilizer. A mother hustled past her with twin toddlers in tow, diaper bag bouncing off her hip like she was late for a flight. A teenager walked by, face buried in his phone, AirPods sealing him off from the world. Ellie looked around again. No silver Lexus, no daughter. Just the shimmer of heat rolling off car roofs. She pressed the home button, 6% battery. Still no reply. A slow breath escaped her. And with it, a wave of something bitter and familiar. She rubbed her knees and adjusted the small shopping bag beside her feet. She'd paid in cash. Not for any big reason, just it had felt better that way. Another half hour passed. The Nordstrom security guard, a lanky young man with a soft face, approached cautiously, holding a water bottle. "You okay, ma'am? Need to sit somewhere cooler?" Ellie smiled politely, brushing silver wisps of hair back under her sun hat. "I'm fine, thank you. Just waiting on someone." He hesitated, then nodded. "Well, if you need anything, I'm up front." Her smile faded as he walked away. She picked up her phone again. 3%. She thought about calling, but she already knew. Sam wouldn't answer. Jake maybe, but only if Sam handed the phone to him. At 5:17 p.m., it finally rang. "Hey, Mom." Jake's voice was too casual, too bright. "So sorry, we got totally caught up at brunch. Time just got away from us. You okay?" Brunch. She closed her eyes. She could practically hear the mimosas clinking. "I'm fine," she said, her voice smaller than she meant it to be. "I'll grab a ride home." "You sure? I mean, we can probably—" "It's fine, Jake." She hung up before the battery could die on its own terms. Opening the Uber app took what felt like years. She ordered the ride, confirmed the location, then sat still, watching the little car icon crawl across the map like it was apologizing for being late, too. When the driver pulled up, she climbed in without a word. The car was cool and smelled faintly of coconut. Ellie held the shopping bag in her lap like it was a child, then turned to look out the window. Outside, the last orange light of the day caught on the edge of the mall's sign, Greenway Plaza, glowing in pink neon. She didn't speak for the entire ride, but in the silence, something shifted. It was slight, small, like a thread pulled loose inside her. The driver stopped outside her building, a plain beige condo complex tucked east of downtown. She stepped out, nodded her thanks, and walked slowly to her door. Inside, the apartment was still. The air conditioning had shut off 2 hours earlier. She placed the Nordstrom bag on her kitchen table, unwrapped the watch, and laid it in its velvet case. She didn't cry. She didn't text again. Instead, She reached for a pen and scribbled something on a sticky note. Weary legs. No reply. Warm bottle of water. Brunch. She stuck the note on the fridge and stood there staring at it, like it was a puzzle she hadn't quite solved yet. Then she said it out loud, barely above a whisper, but sharp as glass. Noted. The following afternoon, Ellie stood outside Sam and Jake's red brick townhouse with the Nordstrom bag pressed tight against her ribs. The July air in Nashville was thick, humming with cicadas. She had dressed carefully, pressed linen blouse, silver earrings, though she couldn't explain to herself why. Maybe she wanted to look like someone worth showing up for. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and the faint sweetness of a candle burning somewhere unseen. Sam breezed down the staircase in a slate-gray sheath dress, phone already in hand. Bluetooth headset blinking like a tiny blue star. "Oh, you brought it," Sam said, eyes flicking toward the box as if it were a delivery. "Leave it on the counter?" Ellie's fingers hesitated on the ribbon before she set it down. "I thought you might want to open it now." Sam's nails, painted a severe shade of burgundy, danced across her phone screen. "Sure. Sure." She tugged the ribbon once and let the box fall open. The watch caught the kitchen light in a scatter of gold sparks. Sam barely looked. "That's nice. Thank you, Mom." Across the kitchen island, Jake adjusted his cufflinks like a man rehearsing for an interview. "It's a nice gesture," he added, smile polite, voice already retreating. "You didn't have to." Ellie forced a small laugh. "Of course I didn't have to." Sam's phone vibrated. "Hold on. Someone from the caterer," she murmured, turning toward the living room, thumbs flying again. "We'll talk later." Left alone with Jake, Ellie stared at the watch still sitting in its velvet nest. The kitchen felt too cold despite the afternoon sun streaming through the blinds. Jake cleared his throat. "You know how it is. Big event week. She's under a lot of stress." Ellie smoothed the hem of her blouse. "I remember." "Anyway," Jake said, glancing at his own watch, ironically cheap plastic. "Thanks again." "Really?" Ellie nodded and picked up her empty bag. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She'd imagined a moment of surprise, maybe even a hug. Instead, it felt like leaving groceries on a stranger's porch. The drive back to her condo took only 15 minutes, but she barely remembered the turns. When she stepped inside, the dim quiet wrapped around her like an old coat. The blinds were half closed, casting stripes of late-day light across the carpet. She set her purse on the table and sat down without taking off her shoes. The phone rang. She didn't even have to look at the screen. "Hi, Paula," she said, voice flat. "How'd it go?" her friend asked, tone already suspicious. Ellie stared at a dust mote drifting through the sunbeam. "It's fine." "That," Paula said, "is your lying voice." Ellie almost smiled, but it caught in her throat. She tipped her head back against the chair. "They're busy." "They're always busy," Paula snapped, "and you're always buying gifts like a walking Hallmark aisle." Ellie closed her eyes. The smell of Nordstrom, air-conditioned perfume and polished tile, still clung to her shirt. "I just wanted to do something nice." "And how's that working out for you?" Paula's voice softened. "You deserve better than crumbs." Ellie's hand tightened around the phone. She wanted to defend Sam, to say something about stress and deadlines. Instead, she said nothing. Paula exhaled. "I'm coming by tomorrow with lemon bars and a plan." Ellie gave a weak laugh. "A plan? You'll see. Don't hang up on me." Paula's tone brightened, but only slightly. "I've got an idea that might surprise you." Ellie's eyes drifted to the sticky note still on the fridge. Weary legs. No reply. Warm bottle of water. Brunch. The ink had started to fade at the edges. She pictured adding a new line. Velvet box. "No thanks." "Okay," she whispered. "Tomorrow then." After she hung up, The apartment felt even quieter. Outside, the streetlights flicked on one by one, halos against the deepening blue. Ellie stood at the window, her reflection overlaying the city beyond. One woman, transparent and solid at the same time. She pressed her fingers to the glass, then whispered into the silence, not quite sure who she was talking to. Something has to change. By Tuesday, the invitation was already curling slightly at the edges on Ellie's fridge, heavy cardstock, gold foil lettering. Caldwell Foundation Annual Gala, A Legacy of Light. The irony wasn't lost on her. Ellie stood at her kitchen counter, reading the RSVP for the third time. The dress code was formal, the donation tier already marked as platinum in Sam's neat handwriting. She hadn't donated, hadn't even been asked. Her eyes wandered to the sticky note beside it, now with 2 new lines. Velvet box. No thanks. Caterer call. No eye contact. She picked up her phone. Her thumb hovered over the calendar notification. Saturday, 7 p.m., Hutton Hotel Ballroom, then tapped delete. She didn't bother to send regrets. Just clicked decline on the RSVP site and closed the tab. It felt good. Not rebellious, not petty, just clean. 20 minutes later, her phone lit up with a text. Sam. Really? Canceling last minute? Don't be dramatic, it's just a busy season. Ellie stared at the message until her coffee went cold. A slow, bitter smile tugged at her mouth. She let out a dry laugh, one that didn't reach her eyes, and pressed her finger against the screen. Delete. The words vanished. So did the sting. That afternoon, Paula arrived with a half-gallon of sweet tea, a lemon loaf, and a brochure clutched in her hand. She didn't wait for pleasantries. You ever heard of Ridgeview Spa Resort? Ellie raised an eyebrow. No. Should I have? Paula flopped onto the couch, fanning herself with the glossy trifold. Top of the Smokies? Private suites? Grown-ups only. They've got a penthouse package this month. Off-season rates. You wouldn't believe the deal. Ellie took the brochure, skeptical. You trying to get rid of me? I'm trying to remind you that your life isn't over just because your daughter forgets you exist between photo ops. Ellie looked down at the images. Sunlit balconies, white robes, serene mountain views. A woman floated in a heated pool with her eyes closed, as if nothing in the world needed her attention. For a moment, Ellie imagined herself there. No kitchen timer dinging, no family schedule to orbit, no phone calls about seating charts or guest lists. Just stillness. She bit her lip. How much is the package? Less than you've spent on Sam's birthdays in the last 5 years combined, Paula said without blinking. And it's yours. If you want it. Ellie stared at the phone sitting face down on her table, then at the RSVP on the fridge, still hanging like a reminder of something she hadn't agreed to. And then at Paula, who waited, silent but steady. Ellie stood, walked slowly to her laptop, and opened it. She typed Ridgeview Spa Resort into the browser. The website was clean, soothing, greens and neutrals, soft jazz in the background. She clicked through photos. A stone fireplace, balcony hot tubs, breakfast served under lantern lights. Then she found it. The Penthouse Serenity Package. 3 nights. Private concierge. Welcome champagne. 0 obligations. Available this weekend. Her hand trembled slightly as she clicked Book Now. Her name filled the fields without her needing to type it. The cursor blinked next to payment info. Do it, Paula whispered, voice near reverent. Ellie entered her card number. Transaction approved. She sat back in her chair. The confirmation email pinged into her inbox. The dates were locked. The countdown had begun. She looked at Paula. What if she asks where I am? Paula sipped her tea, unbothered. She won't. But if she does, tell her the truth. You needed time somewhere you're wanted. Ellie smiled faintly and folded the brochure in half. She didn't throw it away. She tucked it into her purse. The next morning, Ellie walked into the church basement with a clipboard and a calm smile that fooled everyone but herself. The Tuesday morning food pantry volunteers greeted her as usual, George with his high-rise socks and eternal whistle. Loretta, who never unpacked a single box without asking if anyone had remembered the gluten-free shelf. Ellie answered questions, checked inventory, and confirmed the delivery truck's ETA. She was efficient, helpful, present, and then she told them she'd be taking a week off. Vacation? George blinked, his pen freezing above a box of canned peaches. Sort of, Ellie said, keeping her tone light. I just need a little break. Nothing urgent. Just overdue. Loretta squinted at her. Well, don't go off and get used to doing nothing now. Ellie smiled. I'll try not to. Back home, she changed her voicemail to a new recording. Hi, this is Ellie Barnes. I'll be unavailable for the next several days. Please leave a message, and I'll return it when I return. If it's still needed. She hit save, then powered the phone off. That alone felt like a rebellion. Later that afternoon, she wandered the aisles of a downtown luggage store, her fingertips trailing across smooth zippers and shiny leather tags. She chose a forest green spinner with gold accents, not too flashy, but beautiful. A suitcase that looked like it belonged to a woman who chose her own destinations. Then came the wide-brimmed hat from a boutique on 12th Avenue, soft straw with a black satin band, and a thick hardcover from the local bookstore. A Month by the Water, a novel about a woman who left everything behind to write again. She tucked the receipt into the first page like a bookmark. That night, as she laid the new items gently on her bed, her phone buzzed. A message from Nina. Nina. Hey, are you okay? Mom said you're not answering her calls. Ellie sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the message. Of course Sam had framed it that way. She thought for a long moment, then typed slowly. Ellie. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just need some time away. Nothing's wrong. A pause. Then, Nina. Wish I could come. Ellie smiled, and for the first time in days, it wasn't bitter. Ellie. Someday you will, on your terms. She watched the typing dots flicker, then disappear. No reply, just space. Ellie let the silence settle around her. It didn't feel like rejection. It felt like possibility. The next morning, she set out her suitcase and began to pack. Comfortable slacks, loose linen shirts, a pair of sandals she'd bought 2 summers ago and worn only once. She placed the hat on top, careful not to crush the brim. She added the novel, the sticky notes from the fridge folded into its center like a secret chapter. Then paused. From the back of her closet, she retrieved a long-forgotten bottle of perfume, barely used. The label had worn off, but the scent remained soft and sharp. She spritzed it on her wrist and closed her eyes. It didn't smell like the past. It smelled like her. Then came the final item, a small framed photo of herself and Nina at a lake years ago, bare feet in the sand, wind-tangled hair, both of them laughing like the world didn't owe them anything. Ellie stared at it a long time before nestling it between sweaters. The valet opened her car door with a small, practiced bow, and Ellie stepped out into the golden hush of Ridgeview Spa Resort like she was walking into someone else's dream. The air was cool and pine-scented, and the only sounds were the soft crunch of gravel beneath her sandals and the distant trill of birdsong echoing through the Smokies. A uniformed attendant greeted her with a warm towel folded like origami in his hands. "Welcome to Ridgeview, Ms. Barnes," he said, as if he already knew her story. "You're all set for the penthouse suite. Would you like your champagne now, or once you're upstairs?" Ellie blinked, unsure how to answer. "Now, please." He nodded once, and moments later, a fluted glass appeared, bubbles rising in lazy spirals, chilled to perfection. She took a slow sip and felt it trickle through her like applause. Inside, the lobby glowed with understated elegance. Wood-beamed ceilings, quiet jazz, a massive fireplace lit even in early fall. But it wasn't the lobby that made her breath catch. It was the elevator ride, the way her name had been spoken without hesitation, the way no one asked who she was there to see. The doors opened directly into the suite. Ellie stood in the entryway and just stared. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto an endless view of tree-dappled hills rolling toward the horizon. A stone fireplace stood like a monument at the room's center. A private balcony extended outward like a promise. On the table, a handwritten welcome card. Ms. Barnes. We're honored to host your stay. May your time here be as quiet or as wild as you need it to be. She didn't speak, didn't sit, didn't even remove her shoes. Just walked slowly to the windows and placed a single hand on the glass. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She was already here. Her phone buzzed inside her bag, shattering the stillness. Sam. Mom. Where are you? The message flashed across the screen like a flare. Ellie placed the phone face down on the coffee table and walked into the bathroom. Steam already filled the air. A bath drawn by invisible staff to the perfect level. She shed her clothes one piece at a time, like dropping armor, and stepped into the tub. Hot water hugged her like something that wanted her back. For 20 minutes she said nothing, thought nothing. Just let the heat erase the outlines of her former self. When she finally rose, cheeks flushed, limbs light, she wrapped herself in the softest robe she'd ever felt. Her hair curled gently at her temples from the steam. She looked in the mirror, not searching for flaws, not fixing anything, just looking. Room service arrived soon after. Steak cooked medium rare, red wine so dark it looked like ink, and a chocolate mousse so smooth it mirrored the silver spoon. She ate barefoot on the couch with the fire roaring and not a single piece of conversation to fill. For once, the silence didn't feel like a lack. It felt like luxury. Later, she pulled out her portable speaker, scrolled to a playlist she hadn't listened to in years, Debussy, Barber, Copland, and let the music spill into the space like water across polished stone. The kind of music that says something without asking for anything back. Her phone buzzed again, then again. She turned it off. The room glowed gold and firelit. Ellie stood on the balcony with her wine glass in hand, robe still wrapped tight around her, eyes scanning the velvet edge of mountains under dusk. Somewhere out there, people were texting and expecting and planning her around themselves, but they couldn't see this view. They didn't even know it existed. The sun rose slowly over the Smokies, painting Ellie's suite in warm gold and lavender light. She sat cross-legged on the balcony in her robe, sipping coffee from a mug the size of a soup bowl. No noise, no notifications, no obligations. She took a photo, just the view. The sky streaked with soft fire, the treetops barely waking. Then she texted it to Paula with 2 words. You were right. The reply came quickly. That's the look of a woman who doesn't owe anyone her time. Ellie smiled into her cup. Half an hour later, as she wandered the resort's walking path, lined with lavender, pine, and tucked-away benches, her phone buzzed again. Not Sam this time. A name she didn't recognize at first, Karen W. Then another, Michelle D. Then a third, Tina from book club. All the messages carried the same shape, dressed in varying degrees of concern and passive sugar. Hey Ellie, everything okay? Sam's worried. Hope you're well. Sam said you've gone off the grid. Missing you this week. Let us know if you need anything. Ellie stopped beneath a white trellis covered in jasmine. The wind shifted, sweet and cool. She opened one of the messages and typed slowly. I'm just taking care of myself. That's all. She didn't explain where she was, didn't apologize, didn't say she missed them back. She just pressed send, locked the screen, and kept walking. That afternoon, she noticed a small easel set up near the Solarium Cafe next to a wooden sign that read, "Intuitive acrylics, no experience needed." Ellie hesitated, then walked in. The studio was quiet, lit by natural light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. Soft instrumental music played overhead. Each station had a blank canvas, a palette, and a brush roll. A young woman in overalls greeted her with a smile. "Pick a spot. Paint whatever shows up." Ellie sat near the window and unrolled her brushes. For a long time, she just stared at the blank white space in front of her. It reminded her of the journal she hadn't cracked open yet, the part of her that still feared she'd have nothing to say. Then she dipped her brush in pale blue and made her first stroke. 1 became 5. 5 became dozens. She didn't paint mountains or trees or faces. She painted shapes. Free, layered, shifting, like the weather inside her. By the end of the hour, she signed the bottom corner in small, tidy script, EB. The instructor came by to clean up. She paused when she saw the painting. "You have the look of someone who finally exhaled," she said softly, almost like a blessing. Ellie blinked back a sting in her eyes. "Maybe I did." She wrapped the canvas in brown paper and carried it back to the suite like it was a letter only she could read. Later that night, she lit the fireplace again. Not out of loneliness, but out of habit now. Ritual. She poured a glass of wine and pulled the folded sticky notes from her novel. She read them like a map, one line at a time. Weary legs. No reply. Warm bottle of water. Brunch. Velvet box. No thanks. Caterer call. No eye contact. Calendar invite. Delete. I'm taking care of myself. That's all. She added one more line in fresh ink. First brush stroke. No permission asked. The sun was barely over the ridge when Ellie opened her laptop at the suite's balcony table, wrapped in a shawl and cradling her second cup of coffee. The world below her was still waking up. Birds calling across the trees, the soft hum of carts rolling over cobblestone, faint footsteps in the hallway. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wasn't checking emails. Not scrolling through Facebook. She was logging into her bank account, a place she hadn't truly looked at in months, maybe longer. The numbers loaded slowly but precisely. Her main checking account, savings, pension distributions, all as expected. Then she clicked into her credit card accounts. Her stomach tightened. There they were. 2 names still authorized on the account. Jacob Caldwell, Samantha Caldwell. She stared at them like they were ghosts. Old charges floated beneath their names like discarded receipts of decisions she hadn't made. Catering deposits, luxury ride shares, boutique store purchases during charity auction season. A hotel in Atlanta that Ellie had never stepped foot in. She remembered the excuses. "It's just easier if we use one card for now. We'll pay it back in the next cycle. It's technically for the family." Ellie didn't feel angry. Not exactly. It was something cooler, cleaner. She clicked Remove Authorized User next to Jake's name, then Sam's. A pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to remove this user? This action is permanent." Her hand didn't tremble this time. "Yes," she said out loud, and clicked. Next, she called the bank directly, just to be certain. "Hi, this is Ellie Barnes. I'd like to confirm that all secondary users have been removed from my credit accounts. And going forward, I want activity alerts enabled and spending limits reviewed." The voice on the other end was polite, professional. "Of course, Ms. Barnes. I can take care of that for you now." She listened as keys clicked, a soft confirmation unfolding line by line. "Is there anything else you'd like to do today?" Ellie looked out at the mountains, green and silver under morning mist. "Yes," she said. Make sure I'm the only one with access to anything. After the call, she closed the laptop and exhaled, not like someone releasing tension, like someone locking the door behind her for the last time. She reached for the small notepad she kept beside her tea and wrote in steady block letters, "No more apology spending." She underlined it twice. Breakfast arrived soon after. A bowl of Greek yogurt with honeycomb, fresh berries, and a croissant still warm from the kitchen. She ate slowly, watching a hawk ride a current across the sky. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody could reach into her pocket anymore. Later that morning, she walked into the spa with a purpose. The receptionist greeted her with a soft voice and eucalyptus on the air. "How can we help you today, Ms. Barnes?" "I'd like to schedule a massage and facial package," Ellie said. "Whatever's available this afternoon." "Any specific occasion?" the woman asked, already typing. Ellie paused. "Yes," she said. "Me." They both smiled. As she walked through the quiet corridor toward the treatment rooms, she passed a couple whispering behind matching towels. Another woman hunched over her phone near the lockers, furrowing her brow. Ellie kept walking. Inside her private room, the lights were low and the linens crisp. The masseuse offered essential oil options. Ellie chose lavender, not because it was calming, but because it reminded her of who she used to be and who she no longer needed to ask permission to become. She lay back, arms at her sides, eyes closed. And for the first time in years, the only person in the world touching her money, her body, her time, was someone she had hired. On her terms. Ellie arrived early to the cafe just outside the resort gates. Stone patio, mountain view. Quiet enough that nobody needed to raise their voice to be heard. The waitress poured her a glass of sweet tea without asking. The tablecloth was cream linen. The breeze smelled faintly of lemon and wood smoke. She had changed. Not just the outfit, though she wore soft navy slacks and a crisp white blouse that made her feel unshakable, but the weight of her walk, the stillness in her shoulders. When Dean Bryce arrived, he wore his usual, a charcoal jacket and that gold pen clipped to the inside pocket. 72 and whip smart, with a drawl that could lull a snake to sleep. He kissed her cheek as he sat. "You look taller," he said, pulling out the thick manila folder. "Or maybe just lighter." Ellie smiled. "Maybe both." He laid out the papers between them like a quiet map. His tone was calm, even reverent. "Everything we talked about is in here. Updated power of attorney, medical directives, beneficiary structure. The trust breakdown's a little different now, but it's exactly how you outlined." Ellie sipped her tea and glanced at the heading on the first page. "The Eleanor M. Barnes Revocable Living Trust." She read every word, not skimming, not nodding through. This wasn't paperwork. It was liberation, line by line. When she reached the section marked Financial Proxies, she paused. Her eyes traced the words carefully. "The previously assigned agents, Jacob Caldwell and Samantha Caldwell, are hereby removed. Future financial decisions shall rest solely with Eleanor M. Barnes, or a designated successor." Dean waited, letting the silence stretch. "You sure you're ready to sign that part?" he asked gently. Ellie looked at him. "I should have done it 5 years ago, but I'm doing it now." She signed. Dean flipped to the next section, Education Trust Allocation. "This one," he said, "is for Nina. Tuition, housing, and a modest stipend, but only when she turns 18 and enrolls in a program of her choosing. The language protects her from interference." Ellie scanned the paragraph, heart swelling. "She doesn't even know I'm doing this." "She will," Dean said, tapping the page. "When she needs it most." Ellie signed again. Each signature felt like closing a door no one else would walk through again without her permission. She leaned back, and exhaled so deeply it surprised even her. I didn't realize how heavy this was. Dean chuckled. Freedom always travels light. He slid the documents into a leather folder and locked them with a snap. You want me to file this today? Yes, she said. Today. Before I think too hard about how they'll react. Dean tilted his head. You think they'll notice? Ellie didn't answer. She didn't have to. They sat in silence for a while, just watching the wind move through the trees. When the check came, Ellie reached for it. Dean started to protest, but she beat him to it with a raised eyebrow. It's mine. He nodded. Damn right it is. She walked him to his car and hugged him tightly. Thank you, Dean. You didn't need me to do this, he said. You just needed to stop asking their permission. As he drove off, Ellie stood in the gravel lot for a long time, folder in hand, the sun on her back. Rain rolled over the Smokies like gray silk the morning Ellie sat down at the small writing desk in her suite. The mountains disappeared into mist, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt completely invisible, untethered, unobserved, free. On the desk sat a stack of hotel stationery, creamy and thick, embossed with a pine tree crest. She uncapped the pen Dean had given her after lunch, the one that clicked with authority, and drew a slow breath. Then she began. Sam, I'm writing this because the last few months have shown me a pattern I can't keep ignoring. Being stranded in that parking lot wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a line crossed, a final one. It told me, louder than words, that I am optional in your life, except when I'm useful. Her hand stayed steady. The ink dried black and sharp. I don't hate you. I just no longer serve you. This isn't punishment, it's clarity. I will not fund, excuse, or explain my own neglect. I will not be present only as a prop in photographs or a purse for emergencies. I'm still your mother, but I am also myself, and that will mean more distance than you're used to. She paused, eyes stinging, but kept writing. You may not recognize this as cruelty, but I do. And I'm done teaching you how to treat me by accepting it. When she finished, she folded the pages neatly into thirds. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. It felt less like anger and more like closing a heavy book after years of rereading the same chapter. That evening, Paula arrived at the suite carrying takeout Thai food and her usual blunt cheer. Ellie poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her the letter without preamble. Read it, she said. Paula sat in the armchair near the fire and began scanning. Halfway through, she went still. By the end, her eyes were wet. That's not just a boundary, Paula whispered, setting the pages down carefully. That's a declaration. Ellie sat opposite her, elbows on knees. I'm not sending it. Paula blinked. Why not? It's everything you've been trying to say. I don't need her permission to change, Ellie said quietly. This isn't for her. It's for me. They ate in companionable silence, rain pattering against the balcony doors, the fire spitting softly between them. Paula kept glancing at the folded letter like it might ignite on its own. Later, after Paula had gone back to her guest cabin, Ellie laid the letter flat again and smoothed its edges with her palms. She walked to the suite's closet, pulled out the slim black frame she'd bought at the resort gift shop, and slid the pages inside, centering the first line. I don't hate you. I just no longer serve you. 2 days later, when she closed on her new condo back in Nashville, it was the first thing she hung on the wall. Not a family portrait, not a mirror, the letter. Visitors might think it was a poem or a manifesto. Only Ellie and Paula knew it was the moment she stopped being invisible. She stepped back, hands on hips, and studied it as sunlight poured through the east-facing windows. In the glass, her own reflection stared back, smaller, sharper, but wholly hers. The front desk clerk tilted her head, fingers already dancing across the keyboard. Of course, Ms. Barnes. We'd be happy to extend your stay. Ellie smiled. 3 more nights, please. And if you have anything more private, less penthouse, more mountain solitude. The clerk's smile widened. We have a winter cabin suite available. Wood-burning fireplace, lake access, quietest spot on the property. Ellie didn't hesitate. I'll take it. Later that afternoon, a golf cart dropped her at the edge of a winding cedar trail. The cabin rose from the woods like it had been grown rather than built. Glass, stone, timber. Inside, it smelled of cedar and something old and clean, like rain on books. She didn't unpack much. Just her notebook, a bottle of red, and a sweater that smelled faintly of lavender from the spa. That first evening, she wrote a poem by hand, no title, no destination. She wrote it in one sitting, barefoot on the floor by the fire, using a coaster as her paperweight. The words weren't bitter, not even angry. They were hers. In the morning, she walked the edge of the lake with a cup of coffee and a scarf wrapped high around her neck. No phone, no plans. She picked a perfect maple leaf from the ground, crimson edged with orange, and pressed it between the pages of her journal. That afternoon, she bought 4 postcards from the gift shop. One with the Smokies under snow, one with a watercolor of the resort, 2 with blank fronts. She didn't write names, didn't address them. She simply wrote, "Dear you, I am here, and I am not sorry." She left them unsigned in the drawer beside the bed like loose feathers from a bird that had already flown. That evening, she attended a wine-pairing event in the main lodge, a half-dozen strangers seated around a long farmhouse table, laughing too loudly, clinking glasses, passing warm bread and goat cheese like old friends. Ellie didn't perform. She didn't overthink her answers. When someone asked where she was from, she said, "Nashville," and left it at that. When someone joked about how empty nesters don't know what to do with themselves, she replied, "Oh, I figured it out." They laughed, and so did she. At one point, a man across the table asked what she did. She sipped her wine and smiled. "I retired. But now I'm writing again." He nodded, genuinely impressed. "What kind of stuff?" "Poetry," she said. It felt like the first time she'd told the truth in years. Back in the cabin, tipsy from a Cabernet she couldn't pronounce, and a night of being nobody's mother, nobody's ride, nobody's excuse. Ellie opened her email out of idle curiosity. And there it was. Subject line, "I don't even know how to start this." From Samantha Caldwell. Time, 9:12 p.m. She clicked it open. A long, spiraling wall of text followed. Paragraphs filled with phrases like, "I've been going through a lot," and "I didn't mean to hurt you," and "You should have told me how you felt before making changes that affect all of us." There were emojis. There were rhetorical questions. There was one line that said, "I know I'm not perfect, but it's not fair for you to make such a dramatic exit from our lives." Ellie closed the laptop. She didn't reply. Not then. Not later. The next morning, Paula knocked on the cabin door with her overnight bag slung over one shoulder and a 6-pack of ginger beer in the other. "Room service said you were holed up like a writer," she grinned. "Figured I'd come see what solitude looks like." "It looks like this," Ellie said, pulling her inside. "Fire's already going." They spent the day wrapped in throws, watching old black and white movies, gossiping about people they no longer needed to impress. That evening, they toasted to the sound of coyotes in the distance. "To next chapters," Paula said, raising her glass. Ellie touched hers to it gently. "To ones we write ourselves." The letter came tucked inside a pale green envelope, hand-addressed in blocky print. No stamps, no frills, just her name, Grandma Ellie. She found it slipped under her cabin door after Paula had left. At first, she thought it was a note from the concierge, maybe a receipt or a housekeeping request. But as soon as she saw the handwriting, her breath caught. She carried it to the couch, sat down barefoot, and unfolded the single sheet of lined notebook paper. The pen strokes were soft, a little uneven. Not rehearsed, not performed. Just true. Grandma, I didn't know how to say this in a text. I know Mom's mad, and maybe you are too. But I just wanted to say, thank you. For always showing up. For being the person I didn't have to impress. I see what they don't. I always have. Love. Nina Ellie read it 3 times, her thumb brushing the bottom corner like she was memorizing the shape of the ink. Then she cried. Not hard, not loud, just soft, steady tears that came from somewhere deep and old and finally breaking open. Not because she was sad, but because she'd been seen, and not as an obligation. When she was ready, she pulled a clean sheet of stationery from her writing desk and began her reply with deliberate care. Nina, I never needed much. Just to be real with someone, just to be trusted with the quiet parts. You've always given me that. Even when you didn't say it out loud. Let's plan something this summer. Just us. A cabin. A stack of books. No phones. Love you more than I've ever said out loud. Grandma Ellie. She sealed the envelope and addressed it by hand. Not for the mailbox, but for Nina's hands only when the time was right. Later that evening, Ellie called Dean. I want to set up something separate, she said. Small, quiet, just for Nina. Dean didn't ask why. He just said, how soon? Tomorrow, she said. By noon the next day, a small trust was established. Modest, but firm. College support, yes, but more than that, a safety net, a secret act of faith. Ellie insisted it be structured in a way that Sam and Jake couldn't touch, couldn't even question. It's not a gift, Ellie told Dean. It's a whisper, a door she'll know is open. When the paperwork was done, Ellie packed up the cabin herself, folded the sweaters with care, placed her journal back in her bag, slid the leaf she'd pressed between pages like it was glass. The framed letter from the resort stayed wrapped in her passenger seat, alongside the bottle of wine she hadn't opened and the unused postcards. She drove through the winding trail without checking out in person. No need for goodbyes. She wasn't retreating. She was returning. But this time, with different eyes, the city rose around her as she hit the edges of Nashville. Familiar streets, the skyline she'd once watched from Sam's car window like scenery passing by. But it didn't feel like background anymore. It felt like hers again. She drove slowly through her new neighborhood, windows down, autumn wind curling inside. Kids played on the sidewalk with scooters. A couple sipped coffee on their balcony. A man watered a plant he'd clearly forgotten all summer. Normal life. But it didn't feel routine. It felt alive. She pulled into the garage of her condo, turned off the engine, and sat in silence for a moment longer than necessary. Not to delay, just to absorb. Then she smiled. Ellie stood in the middle of the condo's living room, arms crossed loosely, taking it all in. Light spilled through the east-facing windows, stretching across the hardwood like it was welcoming her home before she'd even signed. The open concept made the space feel larger than its square footage suggested. The walls were a soft ivory, the trim crisp and modern. A sliding glass door opened onto a small patio with just enough room for a cafe table and a morning paper. The real estate agent chirped beside her. Sunrise views every day, quiet neighbors, no stairs, new HVAC, and the grocery store's walkable. Ellie barely heard her. Her eyes were already imagining which wall would hold her framed letter. She walked toward the kitchen. Granite countertops, deep sink, cabinets that didn't squeak. Then into the bedroom, where the sunlight curved over the windowsill like it had been waiting. She didn't look for flaws. She looked for belonging. And she found it. I'll take it, she said, turning back to the agent. The woman blinked. Would you like to, think it over? No, Ellie said. I've already done enough of that. The next morning, she wired the payment in full, pulled from her pension fund and personal savings without blinking. No mortgage, no cosigner, no explanation. Ownership. She called the moving company, scheduled the closing, and made arrangements to transfer her utility accounts and digital subscriptions. The woman on the phone asked if anyone else needed to be on the accounts. Just me, Ellie replied. Just me from now on. When the call ended, she opened her laptop and ordered a bouquet from the same florist Sam used for her corporate events. Peonies, white hydrangeas, a few sprigs of rosemary. Delivery. 1 day after closing. The card. Well done. E. That afternoon, her phone lit up. Sam. The message was short, but heavy. Can we talk before you do something irreversible? Ellie didn't respond. Not out of spite, not out of silence, but because there was nothing to salvage. Not the assumptions, not the hierarchy, not the history Sam insisted on misremembering. Ellie sat on the floor of her nearly empty living room, sipping tea from a mug she'd kept since before Sam was born. The sound of her own breath filled the space. For the first time in years, it didn't echo with regret. She pulled her notebook into her lap and wrote 2 words at the top of a fresh page: unclaimed joy. And below it, open floor plan. Morning light. No apologies. She walked the condo again, this time barefoot, her heels brushing against the smooth, sun-warmed planks. She touched each windowsill, each doorway, each blank stretch of wall. She wasn't starting over. She was starting. The condo smelled faintly of new paint and cut flowers when Dean arrived with the final stack of papers. The bouquet she'd ordered for herself, peonies, hydrangeas, rosemary, sat on the kitchen island in a tall glass vase, water beating down the stems like small jewels. Dean set his briefcase on the counter and adjusted his glasses. This is the last round, he said. Once you sign these, the property and liquid assets move into the new trust. It's airtight. Ellie poured him a cup of coffee. I'm ready. You're sure you don't want to leave the condo to Sam? His tone wasn't challenging, just making space for the question. Ellie shook her head. They already assumed it was theirs. They assumed I was theirs. She flipped to the summary page. The trust name stared back at her in crisp black ink. The Barnes Legacy Foundation. Beneficiaries. Nina Caldwell and designated charities. She read the list of charities aloud. Local literacy programs, an after-school art center, a food pantry, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Dean had woven them together exactly as she'd described over lunch at the resort, as if he'd been waiting his whole career to draft this document. Ellie signed slowly, deliberately, her hand steady. The sound of her pen on paper was louder than her own breathing. Dean closed the folder with a soft thud. It's done. Filed electronically. They can't undo it without a court order. And even then, they'd have to look me in the eye, Ellie finished. Dean gave a small, proud smile. Exactly. After he left, she stood in the kitchen alone, the papers still warm from her touch. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt clear. A long corridor she'd been walking had finally opened into daylight. Her phone rang. Sam. Ellie almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside her said, answer once. End it clean. She pressed the green button and held the phone to her ear without a word. Mom? Sam's voice was ragged, the kind of sobbing that sounds practiced but not rehearsed. We just found out about the trust. Mom, what are you doing? Ellie stayed silent. Mom, we were just busy. Sam rushed on. You know how it is. Work, the gala, everything. We didn't mean to hurt you. Ellie's voice, when it came, was low and steady. You didn't leave me in a parking lot by accident. There was a pause on the other end, broken only by Sam's uneven breathing. "I can fix this," Sam said. "We can fix this. Just don't do anything permanent." Ellie looked out at the sunrise through her new windows, the city below, the sky pinking at the edges. Her framed letter hung across the room, the first line glinting in the morning light. "I don't hate you. I just no longer serve you." She took one last breath with her daughter still on the line. Then she hung up. The phone buzzed again immediately. She blocked the number. Silence settled over the condo like a soft blanket. Not empty, not lonely, just hers. She walked to her desk, opened her notebook, and wrote, "They thought it was a gift. It was a promise kept to myself." She underlined it once. Then she wrote Nina's name in the margin, small but solid. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, her name printed in black block letters on the front. Eleanor M. Barnes, contributor copy. Echoes from the Elm Quarterly. Ellie paused before opening it. She stood by the window of her condo, soft jazz playing in the background, her tea going cold on the counter behind her. The envelope had weight, not just the paper, but the moment it carried. She slit the top cleanly with a letter opener Dean had gifted her when the trust was finalized. The kind of thing people used when they knew their mail mattered. Inside, the literary journal smelled faintly of ink and fresh binding. She flipped past the editor's note, past the bios, until she saw it. "Held by no one, carried by myself by Eleanor M. Barnes." Her name in bold, centered on the page. Not in the fine print, not as someone's +1, but as the author. She read the poem aloud, slowly, letting the words fill the room. "I have walked home with hands full of other people's expectations. I have fed my peace to their comfort and called it love. I have left parties early to make sure someone else had a ride. I have been left waiting beside velvet gift boxes and warm bottles of water. But now, I gather what's mine, and I go." She closed the journal and held it to her chest. That evening, she arrived early at the open mic night, her first time attending, her name written in delicate cursive on the sign-up list. The venue was a converted library, all wooden beams and Edison bulbs, with folding chairs set up in rows and a small platform at the front, framed by ivy and fairy lights. There were guitar players, two nervous teens reading rhyming couplets, a man who introduced himself as a tax attorney, but mostly retired from both poetry and law. The room was warm, not in temperature, but in tone. The kind of place where people listened without waiting to reply. When her name was called, Ellie stood, journal in hand. She didn't look at her feet. She didn't apologize for not being a performer. She just walked up, opened the book to her page, and began reading. Her voice was soft but unwavering. With each line, something invisible loosened from her shoulders. By the time she reached the final stanza, there was no tremble. No breath she didn't own. When she stepped back from the mic, the room clapped. Not politely, genuinely. A few people stood. One woman near the back dabbed her eyes with her sleeve. A man with silver hair gave her a slow, reverent nod. But what caught Ellie's attention, what made her breath hitch, was in the very last row, Nina. Backlit by the amber lights, dressed in a soft hoodie and jeans, her arms lifted in a quiet, proud ovation. Ellie blinked fast, swallowing a lump in her throat. Afterward, they didn't say much. They didn't need to. They walked down the street to a tiny pie diner Nina had picked. They shared a booth by the window and split 2 slices, apple crumble and key lime. No phones, no buzzes. Just the sound of spoons tapping ceramic and occasional laughter when they remembered something nobody else at the table needed to understand. "You were amazing," Nina said eventually, almost shyly. Ellie smiled. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't have missed it." They clinked their forks like glasses. "To what?" Nina asked. Ellie considered. To leaving early when we want to, but staying longer when we choose. Nina raised an eyebrow, amused. That's not how toasts usually go. No, Ellie said, but it's mine. Outside, the air smelled like fresh pavement and blooming jasmine. Ellie pulled her cardigan closer as they walked, the journal tucked under her arm like a secret finally told. 1 year to the day. Ellie stepped out of the town car and onto the circular stone drive of Ridgeview Spa Resort, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The mountains rose like old friends beyond the treetops, half-dressed in autumn. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes danced against a breeze that smelled like eucalyptus and pine. The bellhop approached, young and neat in his navy vest. "Ms. Barnes?" he asked, eyebrows lifting with recognition. "Penthouse is ready for you." Ellie smiled. "You remembered. Hard to forget the lady who tipped us in handwritten notes." He took her single bag, canvas, not leather, and led her toward the glass double doors, which opened on cue like the resort had been waiting for her all year. Inside, the air was still soft with cedar and hush. The lobby was nearly the same, but she wasn't. At the front desk, she barely paused. No need for introductions. No need for small talk. Just a gentle nod from the concierge and the handoff of a key card in a soft leather sleeve. Up the elevator, 8th floor. Same whoosh of air when the doors opened directly into her suite. Same windows. Same view. But this time, Ellie didn't hesitate. She didn't stand still and marvel, or reach instinctively for her phone. She walked straight through the open-concept living space, opened the balcony doors and let the skyline greet her like a promise kept. The city was different from the cabin, but the peace wasn't. Down below, lights blinked to life in quiet rhythm. Office buildings, rooftop bars, the slow crawl of traffic that no longer demanded anything from her. She dropped her bag onto the couch and pulled out 3 things: a notebook, her favorite scarf, a tin of loose-leaf tea. 15 minutes later, she sat on the balcony in a wide wicker chair, tea steaming between her palms, the scarf wrapped around her shoulders like a sentence held close. There were no texts, no calendar reminders, no guilt-stained voicemails, just Ellie, and quiet, and choice. She didn't reach for a photo, didn't frame the moment. She didn't need to. This wasn't about proof anymore. It wasn't even about poetry. It was about being. About breath. About stillness. She leaned back and closed her eyes. Down below, the city moved, but it didn't pull her with it. Her phone buzzed once inside. She didn't flinch. Later, she'd find it was a promotional text from a wine shop she'd once visited with Paula. Nothing urgent. Nothing that belonged to anyone but her. She smiled. "Not waiting this time," she whispered aloud. Not for permission. Not for acknowledgement. Not for some opening in someone else's schedule to declare her visible. She stood, walked back inside, and unpacked the rest of her bag. 3 books, all dog-eared, a clean toothbrush, a postcard Nina had sent her from a weekend trip. Taped into the inside flap of her journal, "Thinking of you at the top of every hike. Love, N." No framed letter this time. It didn't need to follow her. She was the declaration now. That evening, she ordered lentil soup, crusty bread, and a glass of the same red she'd once mispronounced in the main lodge. She sat at the small table by the fireplace and wrote 2 pages in her journal. Nothing heavy, nothing carved in stone. Just a record of noticing. How the tea had tasted, how the skyline shimmered without trying, how light could still find her, even from behind glass. As the sun dropped behind the buildings and dusk turned the sky into an indigo wash, Ellie walked to the mirror near the elevator doors. She studied her reflection, not to fix anything, just to witness. She looked the same, but everything was different. They left me in a parking lot. I checked into my life.